Welcome to the Books on Air podcast. I'm Suzanne Harris, and my listeners get the story behind every book. My guest today is Gary Bryant, and Gary's joining me to talk about his book, Invicti Solis, The Rise of the Unconquered Sun. Now, Gary Bryant is an ordained priest in the Orthodox Catholic Church. He's also a hospice chaplain and a licensed master social worker. He has 4 master's degrees, one in theology, English, business administration, and social work. He studied comparative religion at Rice University and at Harvard Divinity School. With 30 years' experience in a form of spirituality called Gurdjieff work, he's authorized by his own guide and mentor to teach and lead individuals in that tradition. In addition, he's the past president of the Prometheus Society, past membership officer of the 999 Society, and a lifetime member of Mensa. Gary, I can't welcome you enough to Books on Air. It's such a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you, Suzanne. I appreciate the opportunity.
You know, I always have questions about authors because people write books for all kinds of reasons. And I'm always curious, what made you decide to write your book, Invicti Solis? What's the background? What's the backstory behind the book?
Well, a particular spiritual tradition you alluded to earlier, called the Gurdjieff work, suggests that people develop, as part of the spiritual path, one or more crafts. And these crafts, whether it be working with hands or intellectual work, are intended to further an individual on the particular path, spiritual path they're on. So my chosen craft is the craft of writing. It's a gift that God blessed me with, but it also requires some honing and development. So that's the primary reason I began writing and eventually published several books. This was my first one.
I'm curious about writing. People start writing for a variety of reasons as well. They, as children, perhaps are readers, and something about something someone else wrote sometimes will spur that idea that they want to write. Sometimes there's a parent or a relative who is a writer. Sometimes there's an event that happens in the person's life, whether it's a positive event or a negative event, and they feel that there's a compulsion there that they must share something about this event with the rest of the world. What started you writing? How old were you, and what event was it that precipitated your being interested in writing?
Well, it was primarily a very early interest in the writings of Mark Twain. And as a child, I was drawn to his writing style. Little did I know at the time, only discovered later, that his masterpiece, Huckleberry Finn, is widely considered the greatest American novel of all time. So I was inspired by his particular writing style. Both Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn tend to appeal to very young people. And so I guess that was the initial interest.
When you were in school, did any teacher ever say to you something about your writing? Did they see that spark and recognize that there was something special about your writing?
Yes, ma'am. I had, and as early as elementary school, I had several teachers who indicated that I might want to pay a little attention to my writing. They either told me it was very good, or they said, well, this is where you need to improve it. And I took their recommendation seriously.
You know, I couldn't agree with you more. You said that writing is a gift from God, and I could not agree with you more, because being able to have a vision when you're writing is something that's really incredible. What's the origin of Invicti Solis? Where did the idea for this particular book come from?
Well, it came out of approximately, at the time that I wrote it, approximately 25 years of organized spiritual work. So I consider the book to be not an intellectual product, but a product of the entire person, insofar as the work that I experienced, the inner work that I experienced, was able to fuse my different parts into something more like a human being is intended to be.
How long did it take you to write the book?
It was about a month.
You're kidding.
No, ma'am, it's about 4 weeks. I was not working at the time, so I pretty much wrote day and night.
Wow, that's shocking. This is a very complex book, and as I read through the sections that I was able to read, I am just so surprised that you are Mensa. I mean, I should not be surprised. I should not be surprised at that. But you did. That's just amazing to me, that you were able to coalesce your thoughts and get that much material done in a month. That's amazing, Gary, really. That truly is a gift.
Well, I appreciate your giving me that feedback. It just seemed to flow, and I tried not to get in the way.
That's exactly perfect. You tried not to get in the way. Let's give our listeners an overview of the book. Well,
I've actually written a trilogy. This is the first book in the trilogy. And the topic of the trilogy, and of this book in particular, is the question of identity. The question of identity is one that presents itself to each individual during the course of their life. And through each developmental stage, from childhood to adolescence to young adulthood, middle age, and finally old age, there's always a set of developmental challenges that present themselves. And so what I'm trying to do is help the reader make this process a little more conscious, to see it as not something that's unusual, but something that's very usual. As a matter of fact, just as an aside, if I had written this book currently instead of back in 2014, I would have probably had a chapter on the transgender phenomenon, which has been in the news so much of late, because the question of gender identity is another example of how questions of who am I and what is my place in the world presents itself to individuals, to each of us.
You're right. I also noticed that as I read through the titles of the table of contents chapters, psychotherapy is mentioned in at least 3 of the chapter titles. What does the psychotherapy aspect, how does it tie in with the book?
Yes, ma'am. Well, I felt that the question of psychotherapy and Invicti Solis is primarily it's the question of identity as it is embedded in its cultural setting. And I believe this is a psychological age, even though it seems to be a little differently nuanced in 2022 than it was in 2014 when I wrote the book. But it's because of the decline in interest in organized religion, particularly among younger people. The question of different forms of help, whether it's self-help in a book or going to see a therapist or a counselor or a psychic or some other form of helper, is a very important way or path that people tend to tread in order to address this question of identity. They're searching for who they are and where they fit into the wider setting, and psychotherapy is intended to help meet need, and that's one of the things I address in the book is that conventional therapy, and which I call change-based therapy, is intended to fulfill personal desire and not need.
Interesting. Do the other two books in the trilogy, do they have the same theme? Have you expanded on the theme and updated the information? How have you carried that forward?
Well, the second book is called The Liberation of Thought. And what that does is it addresses the thinking function in particular, because modern men and women tend to be lopsidedly oriented toward the thinking and to the neglect of feeling and somatic sensation. And then the third one is called The Sickness of Effort, and that has to do with agency, action that we take, efforts that we make in order to address this question of identity. So what I try to do in the first book, which is by far the longest, is address the cultural component, and the second book is gets more toward the individual. The second and third books address the individual and less the cultural components.
When you were writing this book, did you have any target audience in mind? Were you thinking about a specific group of people, or were you thinking just in general about the human race as your audience for the book?
Well, the first book I was thinking as widely and generally as possible, partly because it's a universal challenge, this question of identity. But at the same time, I was also interested in addressing a more specific audience, people who are more galvanized on a conscious level by the question.
This is so interesting for me to talk about. When you're writing a book like this is a very personal book. And often when authors are writing books that are very close to their heart and close to their being and close to their own belief system, sometimes they will have some kind of surprising event that will happen as they're writing the book, or sometimes they will have some kind of learning that will take place as they're writing. Did you experience anything like that as you wrote?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I had already learned that the best way to further one's thought process is through writing. Most of the most well-known thinkers, philosophers, religious thinkers, and so forth, have also been writers, and it's because the process of writing, you're engaged in. There's this idea that spiritual teachings address that we have several different centers, or brains, if you will, not just the head brain, but there's also a center of intelligence in the body and the emotion. And when you're writing, you're actually engaged in at least two different centers of intelligence. It's obviously the head brain, and then the moving center of intelligence, the actual writing. And what happens is that when more than one center of intelligence is engaged, more ideas tend to come. And so I was continually surprised through the process of writing that I'd be writing one chapter and suddenly an idea would appear that would alter my original plan. I had originally planned to go on to something else, and all of a sudden, well, no, I think I'll move in another direction. And this is a typical kind of surprising development that happens during the writing process.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. It's an amazing process to go through. Fiction writers will describe these kinds of things that happen with their brain as well. It's just, there's just something about that process. And I've often thought that that's one of the reasons that therapists will encourage their clients to begin to journal, because it changes the way that you're thinking. It changes the way the brain's working. And I love what you said about bringing the other two kinds of brains into play, because this is just, if someone has not written or if they've not tried to write anything at all, I've written 3 or 4 books myself, some fiction and some nonfiction. You're exactly right. It does, there's just something about it. It's very hard to describe if a person has not experienced it. I'm fumbling a little for words for that very reason, because it's difficult to describe.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. And you're right. It's something that all writers tend to share when they get together.
Yes, because there's this shared experience, and it sounds a little nuts, perhaps, to someone who has not experienced that. But you're right. That's a very strong bonding experience, because it's so unique.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, let's tell our listeners where they can find the book. Now, it's available on Amazon, and I want to do some spelling and make sure that they understand the title and that they get your name right. The title of the book is Invicti, and that's spelled Invicti. The next word is Solis, Solis, The Rise of the Unconquered Sun, by Gary, Gary, Bryant, Bryant. If you've never bought a book on Amazon, just put Amazon in your search feature, click on it. It'll bring you right to their page. You just put the title of Gary's book. Perhaps you could even just put Gary's name there, and his books will come up. Now, when the book comes up and you see the front cover, as you look at that front cover, if you look to the right of the cover itself, you'll see 2 words, look inside. If on the Kindle version in particular, if you'll click on that look inside, the book will come right up, and you'll be able to see it open, and you'll be able to read the table of contents, and then there's a very fine excerpt from the beginning of the book. The preface is there, and then there's some information from chapter 1, so this will give you the flavor of the book, and you'll be able to see what else is in the book because you can see the table of contents. You can buy it. It's hardcover, it's Kindle, paperback, it's right there. You can buy right there on the page. Now, Gary, I know that there are listeners who would like to buy their books from other places simply because Amazon is such a giant corporation. A lot of people like to give somebody else a little bit of business, and I know the book is available other places. Where else might our listeners find it?
Well, they can Google Balboa Press. That's Balboa, Balboa. That's the publisher of the book. And there may be some other sources. That's the only other one, actually, that I know about.
I Googled the name of the book, and I Googled your name along with that, and I came up with a couple of other sources. And so if they want to just put your name, Gary Bryant, and put the title of the book, probably they could just put Invicti Solis. But if they put Invicti Solis, The Rise of the Unconquered Sun, with your name, there are several references to different sources that they could find it. So all they'd have to do is something like that, and they'll be able to find it. But it's on Amazon, and it's on Balboa's website, so those two are easy. Now, they can also find you on Facebook. How would I find Gary Bryant on Facebook?
Well, unfortunately, there are quite a few Gary Bryants, as you can imagine. But I was born in Wichita Falls, Texas, and I currently live in Conroe, Texas. And I'm married. So there are several things. And there's a picture of me. I look like I'm about 27 or 28 years old, with black hair, and I'm wearing glasses and attempting to smile at the camera. So I think hopefully that would help narrow it down somewhat. Unfortunately, I don't have a separate author page, so it's just a regular personal Facebook page.
Well, if they dig around, I think they'll be able to find you. I found, when I looked at the different places, when I Googled, there are lots of different places that they can find you. So if they can find the name of the book and find your name, then I'll bet they'll be able to find you on Facebook.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, this has been such an interesting book, and I'm always curious. I know that authors want their readers to take away something from their book, especially a book like this. When our listeners become readers and they purchase a copy of Invicti Solis and they sit down, this is not a book that they'll read cover to cover in one sitting. This is a book that they will read, think about, digest, go back to, read, think about, digest. This is a book that they will keep and that they will go back to over and over and over. When they finish the first time through, they read that last page and they close the cover either electronically or physically. Gary, what do you want this reader to leave with? What do you want them to take away? What's the bottom line?
I'd like for them to have a deeper feeling for their own existence. The most familiar experience to us is that we exist and that we're aware. Unfortunately, in the daily round of life, it tends to go pretty much unappreciated. So one of the purposes of the book, and the thing I would like the reader to end the book with, is a feeling for the mystery and the joy of existence, and with the recognition that there's always a deeper and deeper impression of existing that's possible for human beings. And that not only is it possible, but it's also the direction of development. It's the direction that we need to follow in order to clarify and, if possible, answer this question of identity. Who am I, and what is my place and purpose in the world?
You know, I think this book is so interesting and illuminating, and when you start to read it, it makes you start to think about the things that you just said. I want to thank you so much for being my guest today. It's been an absolute interesting and delightful talk. I'm so glad we had our conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you, Suzanne, and thank you for the opportunity. It was a joy to get to know you better.
Thank you. Remember, you can find Gary Bryant's book, Invicti Solis, on Amazon, and you can also find it on Balboa Press website. The complete title is Invicti Solis, The Rise of the Unconquered Sun by Gary Bryant. You've been listening to the Books on Air podcast, brought to you on webtalkradio.net. You can also hear this podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. I'm Suzanne Harris, and I hope you'll join me for the next Books on Air podcast, because remember, you never know who's going to be here, and you never know what we're going to talk about. Thank you so much for listening.